I and my husband have been married for 10 years and run a small alpaca farm in rural Montana. 3 months ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, requiring a double mastectomy. This has been especially challenging because I've also been battling rheumatoid arthritis since my 20s. Our property is valuable, but we're constantly tight on cash. Medical bills have been piling up despite insurance. And winter construction work has been particularly scarce for my husband's contracting business. He's always made decent money in the summer, but winters are tough in this industry. My surgery was scheduled during a week when severe winter weather was forecasted. The doctors said postponing wasn't an option because my cancer was aggressive. My husband promised he'd stay with me throughout the procedure and recovery, which was especially important since the hospital is a 90-minute drive from our isolated property and I'd be in no condition to drive myself home. The day of surgery arrived. My husband was with me during the procedure. The anesthesia took hold, and then I was in recovery. I woke up groggy from anesthesia, expecting to see my husband's face. Instead, there was just a nurse checking my vitals who asked if there was anyone else they could call for me. I was confused and disoriented. The nurse explained that my husband had left shortly after I went into surgery, saying he needed to take care of something and would be back soon. 4 hours had passed since he left. The hospital staff had been trying to reach him, but he wasn't answering his phone. Meanwhile, the winter storm that had been forecasted was intensifying outside. I felt this mixture of panic and embarrassment as the charge nurse mentioned they might need to put the ward on lockdown soon due to the worsening weather conditions. Here I was, fresh out of major surgery with surgical drains attached to my chest and no way to get home even if they discharged me. A hospital social worker visited my room. She gently asked if I had somewhere safe to recover, explaining that patients typically can't be discharged without someone to escort them, especially after major surgery. I was struggling to think of options, feeling completely abandoned and vulnerable. My sister lives 2 states away, and most of our neighbors are miles from our property. I was lying there trying not to cry when my husband finally walked in. He casually strolled in, carrying roses. He explained he needed a break and went to a nearby bar for a burger and beer because hospital food is terrible. I was stunned. I just had both of my breasts removed due to cancer, and he decided that was a good time to grab a beer. When I asked why he didn't answer his phone, he just shrugged and said his phone died and he needed some air because hospitals make him uncomfortable. I refused the flowers and told him he sucks. That's literally all I could manage to say through the pain and shock. He immediately acted hurt and suggested I was being ungrateful for his thoughtful gesture. The nursing staff exchanged concerned glances but maintained their professionalism as my husband complained about my attitude after he went out of his way to get me flowers. I spent that night lying in the hospital. The pain medication wasn't strong enough to dull both the physical pain and the emotional hurt. I kept wondering if I was overreacting or if this was part of a pattern I'd been ignoring for too long. Looking back over the past year, there have been so many small moments where my husband has been unreliable, distant, or strangely defensive. Bills that mysteriously didn't get paid despite us having the money. Times when he was unreachable for hours. The increasing frequency of helping a buddy with a project that seemed to come up at the most inconvenient times. The farm has always been my passion more than his, but he used to at least help with the alpacas when needed. Lately, though, he acts like they're an inconvenience. Last month, I had a severe arthritis flare-up and couldn't do the evening feeding. When I asked him to handle it, he sighed heavily. The alpacas noticed his attitude too. I've been making excuses for him, thinking he was just stressed about money or work. But abandoning me at the hospital after cancer surgery crosses a line I can't ignore. The day after surgery, the storm had passed enough for us to make the drive home. My husband acted like nothing had happened, chatting about random things while I sat in pain. When we got home, he helped me to bed, then immediately said he needed to check on something in town and left again for 3 hours. I'm now 1 week post-surgery, still dealing with surgical drains and limited mobility. My husband helps when I directly ask him to, but otherwise seems oblivious to my needs. Yesterday, I noticed some of my pain medication missing. When I mentioned it, he said I must have taken more than I remembered because of chemo brain, even though I haven't even started chemo yet. This morning, I found him searching through my purse where I keep my medication. When I asked what he was doing, He claimed he was looking for car keys. His keys were visibly hanging by the door the entire time. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I'm starting to wonder if my husband might have an addiction problem. There have been times when money has gone missing, and his mood swings have become more pronounced over the past year. Sometimes he's irritable and angry. Other times he's overly energetic and talkative. I haven't confronted him directly about this suspicion yet. I'm worried about what it might mean for our marriage, our farm, and my cancer treatment, if I'm right. I need to focus on healing right now, but I also can't ignore what's happening. I've asked my sister to come stay with us for a while to help with my recovery. My husband was surprisingly agreeable to this idea, which makes me wonder if he's feeling guilty or if he's relieved to have someone else take over my care. I don't want to make a decision about my marriage that I'll regret later, so any outside perspective would help. Thanks for reading this far. Now for the first update. I've been trying to process everything that's happened since my last post about my husband abandoning me at the hospital during my mastectomy. First of all, thank you all for the overwhelming support and advice. Seriously, I never expected thousands of comments, and my inbox is completely destroyed. It's been 2 weeks since my surgery, and I've been recovering at our farmhouse while dealing with these awful surgical drains and limited mobility. The first few days after we got back from the hospital, my husband was actually pretty attentive, bringing me water, helping me to the bathroom, making sure I took my meds on time. I started wondering if maybe the hospital incident was just a one-time lapse in judgment due to stress. Several of you suggested this might be the case. But of course, that helpful attitude lasted all of 3 days before the old patterns started creeping back in. My sister called and offered to come stay with us to help with my recovery, but when I mentioned it to my husband, he immediately shut it down. "We're handling things fine," he said, without even consulting me about what I wanted. I didn't have the energy to argue at that point, still in so much pain from the surgery, so I just let it go. The winter storm that hit during my surgery has made our already isolated property even more cut off. Our long gravel driveway keeps getting snowed in, and my husband has been complaining non-stop about having to plow it regularly. Yesterday, he actually said, "This wouldn't be such a problem if you'd scheduled your surgery for a better time," as if I had any control over when cancer needed to be removed from my body. For those wondering, yes, I've tried talking to him about how abandoned I felt at the hospital, but he either changes the subject or tells me I'm dwelling on the past and need to focus on getting better. Classic deflection tactics that I'm only now recognizing. What's really concerning me, though, is my pain medication. I've been extremely careful about tracking my doses, but somehow the pills seem to be disappearing faster than they should be. At first, I thought maybe I was being paranoid or forgetting doses, but I've been so methodical with my tracking that it just doesn't add up. 3 nights ago, I woke up around 3 a.m. in horrible pain. I reached for my medication bottle on the nightstand, and it was nearly empty when it should have been at least half full. I dragged myself out of bed and made my way through our farmhouse. I found my husband in the living room, TV on, but the volume low. He was staring at the TV. "Have you been taking my pain meds?" I asked him directly. He immediately got defensive. "What are you talking about? Why would you even ask me that? You must be forgetting how many pills you've taken." As we were talking, I noticed something partially hidden under a magazine on the coffee table, a glass pipe I'd never seen before. When I glanced at it, he grabbed it and shoved it in his pocket. "That's just something my buddy from the construction crew left here weeks ago," he said. "I found it when I was cleaning and meant to throw it away." The conversation quickly escalated. I asked him if he'd been taking my medication, and he exploded. "Nothing I do is ever good enough for you. I've been taking care of you and the alpacas and trying to keep our lives together while you just criticize me." Then he stormed out saying he needed to check on the animals at 3 a.m. Who checks on alpacas at 3 a.m.? While he was gone, I did something I'm not proud of, but felt necessary. I searched some of his usual hiding spots. In his workbench drawer in the mudroom, I found a plastic baggie with several of my missing pills and what I'm pretty sure was crystal meth. I've never seen it in person before, but it looked exactly like what they show on those anti-drug pamphlets, clear crystalline chunks. To answer the top questions from my last post: 1. Yes, we have joint ownership of the farm. 2. No, I don't have any family nearby except my sister who's 2 states away. 3. I only have Medicare for insurance, so my coverage is limited. He came back about an hour later, but was calm. He acted like absolutely nothing had happened and offered to make me tea. It was disorienting. I mentioned calling my sister again, thinking it would trigger another argument, but instead, he agreed immediately. "Yeah, maybe that's for the best," he said, nodding too enthusiastically. "Actually, I was going to tell you, I need to go help my buddy with a construction job in the next county. Might be gone for a few days." As he packed an overnight bag, I realized this construction job excuse has become a frequent occurrence over the past year, always coinciding with his increasingly erratic behavior. Sometimes he'd come back energetic and talkative, other times irritable and aggressive. I felt like such an idiot for not seeing it sooner. In my defense, I've been a bit preoccupied with the whole cancer thing. My sister is driving up tomorrow, and honestly, I'm terrified about what might happen next. I don't know if I should confront him directly about the drugs I found, or wait until I have more support here. Part of me is worried about what he might do if cornered. He's never been violent before, but his mood swings are getting more unpredictable. I know I need to focus on healing from this surgery and preparing for my upcoming treatments, but how am I supposed to fight cancer when my home life is falling apart? Still trying to process everything, honestly. So many of you warned me in the comments of my last post that his behavior at the hospital wasn't just a one-time thing, but a symptom of something much bigger. I wish I hadn't been right about the addiction suspicions. I'll update again after my sister arrives and we figure out next steps. Thank you all for the validation and support. It's made me feel less crazy and alone in all this. Hands literally shaking as I type this update. Now for the second update. Update 2. Hey everyone, first I want to thank you all for the supportive messages and advice after my last post about my husband abandoning me at the hospital and stealing my pain meds. It's been about 10 days since I wrote that update, and things have somehow managed to get both better and worse at the same time. My sister arrived the day after my last post, and she's been helping with my recovery, managing my medications, keeping them secured now, and even learning how to care for the alpacas. The first couple days were rough. My surgical drains were still in and the pain was pretty bad, but having someone here who actually cares about my well-being has been such a relief. My husband has been gone this entire time on his construction job. He calls every day, and it's the strangest thing. Some days he sounds very energetic, talking quickly about plans and ideas. Other days, he sounds down and defeated, barely stringing sentences together. With my sister here, we've had time to really look through things around the house. What we found was devastating. While I was focused on not dying from cancer, apparently my husband was busy destroying our finances. We found stacks of unopened medical bills hidden in his desk drawer, several notices about missed mortgage payments I had no idea we were behind, and most concerning, text messages from numbers I don't recognize demanding payment for what he owes. I had an oncology follow-up appointment yesterday, and the doctor is recommending we start chemotherapy in the next couple weeks. I'm trying to wrap my head around how I'm going to manage treatments when I can barely keep our farm running and now have all these financial worries on top of everything else. Apparently, my husband has been borrowing money from pretty much everyone in town over the past 6 months. Sometimes claiming it was for my medical bills, other times saying it was for farm equipment or repairs, each time with increasingly elaborate stories about repayment that never materialized. I was mortified hearing this. We've lived here for years, and these people are our community. My sister and I were sitting at the kitchen table this morning, trying to figure out how to handle the bills when we heard tires on our gravel driveway. I looked out the window and saw my husband pulling up in a new truck. Not just any truck, but one costing over $60,000. We can barely make our mortgage payments, and he buys a new truck. I was shocked. He entered the room, talking quickly and loudly about how everything was going to be. "I've got it all figured out," he announced, pacing around the kitchen. "This friend of mine has investors, and they love our property. We're going to convert part of the back acreage into a glamping resort. Luxury tents, hot tubs." My sister immediately asked, "How exactly did you pay for that truck outside?" His answer was vague, something about investors who believe in the vision and how the truck was necessary for the business. When pressed for specifics, he just kept changing the subject. The more questions we asked, the more agitated he became. Finally, my sister confronted him directly. We found the bills you've been hiding and the drug paraphernalia, and we've heard from half the town about the money you've been borrowing. What exactly is going on?" I just sat there, feeling drained. Between the cancer, the surgery recovery, and now this, I was overwhelmed. Part of me had been hoping there was some explanation that would make sense of everything, that maybe I'd been wrong about the drugs, or that there was some plan behind the financial chaos. But instead of denying anything, my husband's face changed. He sat down and started crying. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under," he said between gasps. "Watching you get sick, worrying about money all the time. I just needed something to help me cope." The conversation took an even darker turn when he suggested that my health problems were part of why he'd been using drugs. "Do you have any idea what it's like?" he asked, angry. "Watching your wife go through cancer while trying to keep everything else together? The drugs just helped me deal with it all. After months of feeling guilty for being sick, for being a burden, for needing help, I'd had enough. My medical records show the tumor was growing for at least a year before diagnosis," I said quietly. "Your behavior started changing about a year ago, too. The timeline doesn't add up. You're not using because I got sick. I got sick while you were already using." The look on his face changed immediately. He grabbed his keys from the counter and stood up. "I don't need to sit here being attacked while I'm trying to help us," he said, heading for the door. "You have no idea what I've been going through or the opportunities I'm creating for us." Just before walking out, he said, "Anyway, I've already signed the paperwork. Use the property as collateral for the startup loan. Guy I'm working with says we'll be up and running by summer." After he left, my sister helped me contact a lawyer friend of hers. The news wasn't good. Since both our names are on the property deed, my husband's actions have put our entire farm at risk. If this investment opportunity is as questionable as it sounds, we could lose everything. That night, as my sister helped change my surgical dressings, I made the hardest decision of my life. I cannot focus on fighting cancer while also dealing with my husband's addiction and financial recklessness. Something has to change, and it can't be my health. I've already lost my breasts to cancer. I am not going to lose my life to it because I'm too busy dealing with my husband's actions. The lawyer is coming tomorrow to start paperwork for a legal separation and possibly a restraining order to keep him from making any more financial decisions that affect our property. I'm terrified about what comes next. But for the first time in months, I feel like I'm taking back some control over my life. I know many of you warned me in my previous posts that things might get worse before they get better. You were right, and I should have listened sooner. I can see clearly now. Edit. Forgot to mention that we found out he's been telling people in town that my cancer is terminal and I only have months to live. The feed store owner's wife brought casseroles and asked how I was holding up with the prognosis, which was the first I'd heard about supposedly dying. My oncologist is actually quite optimistic about my chances with treatment. Apparently, my husband has been using my imminent death as another excuse to borrow money. I wish I could say I was shocked by any of this, but honestly, it just confirms what I've been suspecting for months. I'm focusing now on getting through my upcoming chemo treatments and saving our farm one day at a time. Thank you all for giving me the strength to see things clearly, even when the truth hurts more than the surgery. Now for the final update. Final update. The alpaca farm, cancer, and drug-addicted husband saga. It's finally over. First of all, thank you to everyone who's been following this saga over the past few months. Your support and advice literally kept me going when I thought I might lose everything. My health, my home, and my sanity. It's been 3 months since I wrote my last update. Feels like 3 years, honestly. Since then, I've officially filed for divorce, gotten a temporary restraining order, and started chemotherapy. The chemo has been rough, but oddly enough, it's been easier to handle than the chaos my husband created. After we found all those hidden bills and the evidence of his drug use, my lawyer friend moved quickly. We filed emergency paperwork to prevent my husband from making any more financial decisions regarding our property. The judge granted me temporary control of everything once we showed evidence of his addiction and the unauthorized loans he'd taken out using our farm as collateral. Shout out to everyone who told me to document everything. You saved my farm. I had to sell 8 of our alpacas to keep up with the most urgent medical bills, but I kept our original breeding pair at least. The farm supply store has been letting me run a tab until things get sorted. Small towns can be amazing sometimes. My sister stayed for 6 weeks until I got through the worst of my initial recovery, and now my cousin comes by 3 days a week to help with the heavier farm work while I'm going through chemo. Throughout all this, my husband has been texting and calling constantly, cycling between tearful apologies and vicious threats. He showed up at the property twice, despite the restraining order. The first time, he was clearly high and kept insisting he just needed to grab some tools. Yeah, right. The second time, he came at 2 a.m. and started banging on the windows until I called the sheriff. Terrifying when you're alone on a rural property. Today was the final divorce hearing, which I've been dreading for weeks. I sat in the courtroom with my sister and lawyer, wearing my favorite headscarf to cover my chemo hair loss. My husband showed up 20 minutes late. The judge was an older woman with zero tolerance for nonsense, thank goodness. She started reviewing the case facts, and my husband immediately interrupted her, claiming I was kicking him while he's down, and that his addiction should be considered a disability. The judge shut him down. My lawyer presented evidence of how my husband had been diverting our farm income to fund his drug habit. We had bank statements showing cash withdrawals that matched up exactly with texts from his dealer, which we found on his old phone. There were also documents from 3 different predatory loan companies where he'd used our property as collateral without my knowledge or consent. When confronted with all this evidence, my husband actually claimed that I was too focused on my health problems to handle our finances properly, so he had to take control. The audacity of this man never ceases to amaze me. The real bombshell came when my lawyer presented my medical records alongside our pharmacy records. They showed exactly how my prescription medications kept disappearing during my most vulnerable recovery periods, with detailed notes about how my husband would gaslight me when I questioned the discrepancies. The judge responded accordingly. My husband was getting increasingly agitated as things weren't going his way. When the judge asked if he had anything to add in his defense, he launched into this bizarre speech about how caring for a sick wife drove him to make bad decisions, and that I was abandoning our marriage vows of in sickness and in health. I couldn't take it anymore. Despite feeling weak from my last chemo session 3 days ago, I stood up. My lawyer looked concerned, but didn't stop me. I addressed the court as calmly as I could. I've been fighting my health issues and my marriage. Today, I am removing this burden from my life. The courtroom went completely silent. Even my husband had nothing to say. The judge looked at me with what I think was respect, then ruled decisively in my favor. She granted me full ownership of the farm property and ruled that I was only responsible for my medical debts, not the drug-related loans. She stated that my husband's unauthorized use of our property as collateral constituted financial abuse, especially given my vulnerable medical condition. Outside the courthouse, my husband completely lost it. 1 minute, he was begging for forgiveness, saying he'd get clean and be the man I deserved. The next minute, he was screaming that I'd ruined his life and that I'd regret this when the cancer comes back. My sister physically put herself between us, while courthouse security escorted him away. My sister deserves a freaking medal for everything she's done. The drive home was surreal. I felt this bizarre mixture of intense grief for the marriage I thought I had and overwhelming relief that this chapter of my life is finally over. We stopped by the pharmacy to pick up my post-chemo meds, and I didn't have to count the pills or hide them when we got home. It's the small victories, right? I've got 2 more rounds of chemo to go, then radiation therapy after that. My oncologist is optimistic about my prognosis. The farm is starting to stabilize financially now that money isn't disappearing into my husband's drug habit. I've even hired a local high school kid to help with daily chores when I'm not feeling well, pays in cash and alpaca wool products, which he sells online for extra money. Smart kid. I'll try to respond to comments, but might be slow since tomorrow is a treatment day and I'll be pretty wiped out. Edit. A lot of you have asked about the glamping resort idea and those investors. Turns out, the investors were actually just more drug dealers my husband owed money to. They had convinced him this resort scheme would be a way to launder money through our property. When they realized the property was tied up in legal proceedings, they mysteriously disappeared, probably for the best. For those in similar situations, dealing with addiction and gaslighting in your relationship while facing health challenges, remember that choosing your own health and sanity isn't selfish. It's necessary.